My name is Isabel Davis, and my new Decameron story is a creative adaptation of a poem from 1598 by Cornish writer Richard Carew called A Herring's Tale. Remember whilst you listen that Cornwall was on the front line in the Anglo-Spanish War at the end of the 16th century. The Spanish Armada was first seen from Lizard Point in Cornwall, and that the story was written in the reign of Elizabeth I, the second childless Queen of England. Once upon a time, there was a nymph called Deiopeia who was loved by the wind god Aeolus. He courted her every day, ruffling her hair as he did the grass in the meadows, and when his desire was more urgent, gusting under her skirt. Refusing him, she said she was dedicated to the service of Juno and had taken vows. Every day Deiopeia groomed and fed Juno's peacocks, bridling them up like horses. Then they lifted the goddess's chariot into the sky on its celestial course. On their return, Deiopeia coaxed the birds back to their gilded enclosure, and there they made coverlets of their wings, arched them over the nymph, winked their white eyelids closed, and slept. Let the wind blow, she thought, snug in her jewelled feather bed. One day, spurned again, Aeolus plunged his spear into the belly of the pregnant earth, releasing the winds imprisoned there, who flew, blustering, to his service. He sent them to abduct a peacock from Deiopea's care, whose screeches were muffled by the wind's howling, to be back in the earth's womb. Aeolus sat in his cloud studio, reshaping himself, blowing into being a beak and talons, moulding his billowing energies into an oil-blue breast. When he was new made, he took the peacock's place in Juno's sacred aviary. Juno, in her goatskin tunic and carrying her mighty sceptre, was sure to look the other way. As night fell, Deiopeia felt cold. Instead of stillness, there was an unfamiliar movement, a fretful and insistent rustling. She pulled the bird's feathers closer, but couldn't block out the chill. Then, suddenly, where a curtain of wings should have been, there was a pinioning quill, a cage of talons over her fist. The rhythmic heartbeats that usually lulled her to sleep were replaced by an alien pulse. She called out for protection from Juno, who closed her ears. The next day, Aeolus fulfilled his part of the dark bargain. In return for Juno's gift of Deiopeia, he smashed Aeneas's fleet of Trojan ships against the rocks. Deiopeia brooded. The tempest which raged inside her gathered into a swelling egg, which hardened in the iron of her body, was laid in a peahen's scrape nest, and incubated in the icy love of the wind god himself. Like other eggs that the wind fathered, Deiopeia was sure her egg wouldn't hatch. Mostly it was still as stone, yet now and again, when the wind scudded over, it would turn, creaking and stiff, a quarter turn, a half, a full circle. And against her expectations, out of the pale, rust-coloured shell toppled, not a quivering translucent chick, but a smith-forged weathercock. Miles to the north, in the chilly island of Britain, the magician Merlin heard on the wind the weathercock's hatching. Strapping his staff to his back, he travelled in a blink across seas to Juno's great garden estate, and there he found the weathercock discarded amongst bird feed and straw. Cradling the avian wind-child, Merlin flew back to the bleached-blown Cornish shore. Then, in the blasting rain, he fixed one of the bird's feet to the tower of the castle of Tintagel, the site of the conception and birth of the great King Arthur himself. And there, on that pinnacle, in the ancient kingdom of Britain, the animal came alive. Its feathers like knives slashed the sky as it rotated to face its father, the wind. In the dawn light it scraped out its metal crow and surveyed the rocky stormlands of his kingdom. And that's where he perched, for centuries, lording it over the fleshly life that scurried, prowled and walked below. Until one fateful day, when he saw an assailant approaching, climbing up the stone tower, leaving in his wake a silver slimy trail, a shelly house hoisted on his back, like a ship cutting through the waves. What was it? It had no feet, and yet it moved. It had no arms, and yet it clung. The face of a leopard, the skin of a snake, the belly of a toad, 2 antlers like deer, and the hump of a camel. What strange parentage could bring such a shape-shifting hybrid to life, creeping, oozing, crawling, edging to battle? While the snail climbed, the weathercock made a battle plan. His beak and claws were sharp. He could swing fast and, if necessary, slow. He had an arrow worn to a point by the weather that could thrust, impale, and kill. He was also pinioned by 1 foot, and the predictability of his rotation left him vulnerable. His enemy's gluey assault soon overwhelmed him. But just when he was on the very borders of defeat, Aeolus called a parliament of the winds, sending out Boreas the north wind with a beard of icicles, and Zephyrus the warm western breeze, to his son's rescue. They blew the snail, that insolent opportunist, that pirate adventurer, onto the rocks below. The snail's shattered shell, a broken keel, appeared as a tiny speck to the princely weathercock. My father the wind is lord here, the weathercock thought, and he twisted in his filial affection. And far below him, a bird of flesh and pulsing blood pecked the snail clean from the pieces of his armour cladding.